would like to deal today with the idea of the science of Chazal. Seems to be a topic that people spoke about, wrote about, printed about, and maybe it's time to see what Maimonides has to say about it. The science he's dealing with, we obviously know, is very dated. The science that he's dealing with, that he's convinced is the truth is, well, large points have been perceived as non-true. Even if they are true, not because of the reasons that he thinks they were. He is a Aristotelian philosopher, pseudo-scientist. Well, that's what science was at the time. Science, the tools of scientific verification were nothing even weren't even close to what you think is science. This is not the place to discuss that. So I just want to see a few things here. For example, I'm sure that you say Pesukah de Zimra. I'm sure it sounds like, when the sun comes out, like there's a whole orchestra, right? There's a lot of noise. When the Koychavim come up, boom, it sounds like there's a whole rampage. And you would say, yeah, I guess it's metaphor, and it means blah, right? And you kick it up some Chassidish book will explain it, or something like that. That's what you do naturally, because you have no reason to think there's any noise. Okay? Now let's see what people thought before you. Go to Perik Chelik Beis, Perik Ches. Okay, I'm going to read this translation, which is slightly different than yours, so just pick up on it. Min hashkafot hakdumot hanefutzot. It is a ancient and commonly perceived perception. Etzel philosophim, philosophers at the time were scientists, because science heavily was based, especially this type of science, was based heavily on philosophical deduction. They felt that logic, which is true, logic is a deduction, and they felt that everything has to be logical. Therefore, according to their perception of reality of logic, this is what is. I've discussed this multitudes of times. If you look at the biology of Chazal, nothing to do with the Homo sapien we know, maybe it's the Neanderthal. I'm not sure, because it's got nothing to do with it. I don't know if you know much about this. Even female anatomy, as late as the mid-18th century, science was very, very ignorant. If you, unbelievably ignorant. You should read about it. Maybe you should. I don't know. Ben Azman, get yourself a good list of decent books to read. Here's one about biology in the 1700s on the female. It's frightening what they didn't know. They chose not to know. It's not tznius, whatever it be. I don't know why. They didn't know. They pushed it, and it's like the mythology is crazy. And that was science at the time. So when we talk about this, I don't mean to say the ancient Greeks. I mean, we're talking about, our founding fathers, Tom Jefferson, etc., the great Ben Franklin, the big electrician that figured out electricity from lightning through a key. He didn't know much about biology. Okay? I mean, you can see by the medicines at the time that it's like bloodletting was very common. In Chazal, it's very common. It was very common till very late. Well, ask the typical doctor what he thinks about it, and you'll see not much, to say the least. Okay, so let's understand this. The context, please. I want us to understand the context. So, the movements of the galgalim. Now, what are the galgalim? Now, don't think it means the planets. His perception of astronomy, as seen in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, is ancient, good old Greek astronomy. That is that the world, it's a machlek is what it means. We'll see in a minute. He's going to describe it. The world is there, and it doesn't move. And there are 7 spheres which rotate around the world. And each sphere, there are certain constellations, stars, etc. And they rotate at different times. Therefore, at different places, at different times of the year, you see different stars, not because the Earth has changed and it's not evolving. The Earth is staying where it is. The sky is moving around it. And the question is, those stars and those bodies that you see, they would even be like kavua. They would be. That's part of the galgal. So the galgal. If you ever go to a museum, you probably look it up. And I was going to say Britannica, but you wouldn't know what that is. Wikipedia. Try to look up Wikipedia. I'm sure in ancient astronomy, you'll see pictures of ancient astronomy. You'll see the globe and circles around it. You see in old books, you'll see that. Those are the galgalim that the Rambam is talking about, okay? So those galgalim that move around, the skies that move around the planet Earth. Kolot nura'im ma'od v'atzumim. So people think that movement creates enormous noise. Now, how did they think they saw this, they heard this? They figured it's something big, it moves, it's got to be noisy. Okay, whatever the logic was, I'm not playing the game, do you understand? Because I'm not there, okay? But this was called science, so I want you to understand that. Now in Chazal, in Psukim, it sounds that way. Well, the Psukim describe the koil hamoin, Chazal described the koil hamoin of things happening. Now, if they're to be taken literally, could be because they're based on the dated science at the time. And that's how you, unless you're going to kick it into metaphor, you must understand the Divrei Chazal also. Is there someone outside? What are we going to do? You know, I feel Pisklish again and Chayzin B'tshuva. You come in, no? Hello? Hi there, man. Nice to see you. Lock it. Okay? So I just want us to understand. So Chazal is for that. Now we can kick it into metaphor, but at the time there was no reason to kick it into metaphor because that was cutting edge of perception of reality. So you took it literally the way it was. Okay, I want us to understand that. Okay, but today you're not going to take it literally. Today, well, we've been running around the planet. You know, since the Russians kicked up the Sputnik, we've been floating around. We're closer to the Lord, right? And no noise. What can I tell you? They actually have an astronaut that just came, which is in Israel at the moment, which he is like the human being which is the most time been in space. I think it was 600 days or 500 days or something like that. Some guys actually here now. There's like a space thing, the Ilu Nishmas Ilan Ramon, and. Hey, ask him if there's noise out there, and he'll say no. Okay? I just need to understand that. So when you say Chazal says, the Putz is, we'll somehow, thank God for the Chassidish Eden, we know how to kick the Psukim into different ways, which are lav dafka pshut shemika. Or we can always use the common idea of Dibur Torah Koloshim Bnei Adam. The Torah dealt with the language, as the Rama wrote in the beginning of the Sefer, of the illiterate Girgashi farmer, how he understood reality, and that was the language that the Torah uses. Remember we learned that here? So it doesn't have to be Loshem Dei Adam of 2020, which will be. No, it's way back then. What did the farmer in Yevus, how did he perceive reality in that period of time? That would be the time of the Mikra. And David HaMelech may be talking about the time of of people thought in his time, and therefore you'll have different things explaining different things. You may be able to find understanding in context of the knowledge of contemporary people at that time. I'm giving you a big key how to understand multiple things in Chazal and not to get very nervous, okay? You don't even have to kick it into metaphor. What for? They spoke through a certain understanding, etc. Now they speak about the four elements. Now, in what science today do we have four elements? You can do what you want, but the four elements that historically, what was known as the four elements, are non-existent. Okay? It's a category you can choose to make your own four elements. Yeah, Yud, K, Vav, K. Four elements. You can do that. The Ari does that. You can do that too, but that's not what the Chazal meant, at least Stam and Milsa at the time, taking into account their perception of reality, right? Very simple. What does this mean to me today? That's another topic, but first let's understand this. We're allowed to understand that the language used by Chazal is based on the cutting edge of their understanding of the period. With the science, understand the period, etc. And through that, absolutely, Kadosh Baruch Hu wanted them to understand his Torah. He didn't expect them to have the Hubble. And Armstrong didn't. His great small step for humanity up on the moon. It didn't happen yet. So obviously they thought the moon sings Shira, and it's really made of Chaimer. It's some kind of Chaimer Dak. You want me to show you Rishonim? It's all. They weren't using science. They were using philosophical understandings of midrashim, of psukim, and they came to that conclusion. Okay, but you have other tools today. For example, I just want us to understand, it's a very important aside. I mean, be very careful. This is not a tool for every Zayber Moichel Shmendrik That's why the Rambam writes, these things are supposed to be learned only after you're baki ba'vayz by verava. That's the honest truth. I just want to give you a taste. When you hear something, don't jump and say, "Ooh, relax," okay? You start relaxing, you can be more inclusive, and you don't have to, like, say, treif all day, which is common behavior in the world here. Here, I don't know what, the world, okay? That world, not my world. But you have to understand, as this is a davar pashut. We have to get used to this idea that Chazal spoke the language that they had. Now, Kosh Baruch Hu gave you the Torah. He expected you to understand the Torah. Well, he expected you to understand the Torah in the year 720. He expected you to understand Torah in the year 1000 BCE. He expected you to understand the Torah in 1522, in 1776, and would you believe it, in what good old 2020, it's okay? I'm going weiter, you understand? What's the Zayin yet? Now, did he expect at every stage people to understand the same thing? It's impossible. Your tools to understand reality are different. And one of the major tools you use of saying language is understanding. How do I understand things according to what I know today? If today I know that the body of a person is so and so and so and so and so and so, and Torah is nitzchi, so if there's any ramification of today, I have to now understand it with the tools I have today. Granted that the tools at the time were legitimate because those were the tools of the cutting edge of reality at the time, but now you have other tools, you have to use them. If hypothetically the Rambam would be alive today, I can tell you right now, most of this book he would discard. It's heavily obsolete. It's good for classic scholars, okay? That's the honest truth. I mean, the Rambam I had this conversation once with a young man from Yeshivas B'nai Torah, you know, that's in Far Rockaway. The Rosh Yeshiva there was a chavrusa, my brother-in-law, Zechan Racha, so I knew him quite well. His name was Rabbi Chait. He still is. He's Chosh Tam Tzacham. But he is like a Chosh Tam Tzacham. And he's done tremendous things in life. But he's like they're into Mara Nevuchim as if it's, well, I laugh and say it's like the gospel. Yeah, as if it doesn't mean anything now. I don't want to say, they take it like, 1 minute, relax. I said, so when the Rambam would wake up today, he wouldn't write this book. Philosophy has developed. Much of the perceptions of reality which were translated and explained in ancient Greek philosophy are obsolete. Brother dear, we have telescopes, we have microscopes, we have so many things today, we should now attack reality differently. We're going to create new perceptions. And therefore there's going to be new models. I'm not talking about the identity. If you'd be surprised at what's there, you'd have to rewrite it. And he would rewrite it. You almost ask the question, why am I reading this book? Because at the end of the day, he teaches me an approach. He himself, if you read the book, would understand that he would rewrite it. So I need you to learn the book to understand that he would rewrite it. That's why you need the book. I want you to understand what this is. This book is a tremendous, creates a thirst for knowledge and inquisitiveness, and he really leaves a lot of things open. Say, guy, go learn something. Like, don't be a little bumpkin, a little engineering, a little this. Good for making money, but at the end of the day, it's going to Shvistin, you're not going to be. You'll be a book. You'll be a buck in Yiddish. That means a ram, a dumb ram. That's all you'll be. So let's see what it says here. I want to understand.
Are both of them correct?
What?
As in,
Well, we'll see in a minute. Let's first read him now, okay? I opened up a box. I know I did this. I opened up a box. I know why I'm opening the box. I don't plan to close it that fast, so relax. מן ההשקפות הקדומות הנפוצות אצל הפילוסופים והמוני בני האדם כי לתנועת הגלגלים וקולות נוראים מאוד ועצומים. It's a very noisy reality in space. First with A, there's galgalim, not true. B, that they move, not true. C, that they make a lot of noise, not true. There's nothing there to make noise, by the way. Okay? והייתה ראייתם על כך במה שאמרו כי הגופים הקטנים אשר אצלנו ימנעו תנועה מהירה יישמע להם שעון עצום והד מחריד. Now listen to the science. Since we see today when something moves very, very fast, it makes noise. Why? Why? What?
The air barrier creates a sound.
Exactly. Air barrier creates friction. Whoever said there's air up there? Whoever said there's friction up there? This is a raya for the Bubba, you understand? I mean, my Bubba hopefully was a little more intelligent. But this was the raya at the time. You took certain things for granted. It's like the yeshiva bacher takes things for granted. You know, it's a chefzer. Okay, it's a chefzer. Good. Now what do I do with it? Don't know. Find the right button. It's the same thing. So that's what he says here. He says, this is a raya g'dayla. במשום כי הגופים הקטנים אשר אצלנו אם נעו תנועה מהירה יישמע להם שעון עצום והד מחריד. It'll be a terrifying echo. Things that really spin. כל שכן גופי השמש והירח והכוכבים לפי גודלם מירוסם, they obviously move and they're very big. There must be tons of friction. There's a hell of a lot of noise. Okay. Do I have to explain why this is like, this is like funny? Because today we know, who's ever said that what's the laws of science which are dealing here are galactal, that they're all over. Do you really think that the amount of density of air that you experience here is the density of the air? I wish it would be so. Then they wouldn't have to have all these funny missiles to get up there. It doesn't work. We know it's not true. Okay? But that's the way it is. Then he says, V'kol kvutzas Pythagoras svurim sheyesh them kolot arevim ksuvim. Now the question is, what is this a noise? So some people say it's just a lot of noise. The Kvutza, Pythagoras, you ever hear of him? He's your father of geometry. Okay, Sfurim, Sheyeshem, Kolot, Arevim, Ksuvim. It's like a very nice tic-tac, you know what I mean? They were up there, they heard that Araya. It's Mustavra Mills, what I call this is Beichsvurs. It's Beichsvurs. Okay? Av Godlum Kiketzav Lachanei Muzika. He thinks this. It's not Sha'on Machrid. They think, Adrab, who said the Sha'on Machrid? Maybe it's in a way which is beautiful musical. I look at this Machlaik and say, okay, what else is new? I hope they do Vivaldi up there. Right? Now there's a problem. If it's so noisy, why we don't hear it? So no, they start saying, yes, the clouds and the density of air, etc., is a filter. And then they say, Niteret. So you say another Kiddush. What's the problem? It's like Mamash Ashir. Okay? Right? This is our nation also has this Ashkafa. That's the sum of the Psukim. When you read the different Psukim, Zimmer describes how the things like the movement of the sun going out. The sun goes out of his house, and wow, it's running. Okay, maybe that's possible. Okay, not the sun. I know. Maybe it was the perception of the sun at that time. I really have to check out the signs at the time to know, A, is this metaphor? Or is this, what did David mean at the time? Now, the problem is, since it's canonized, this is where it gets heavy. What the author himself meant, it could hypothetically be dated, or it could be metaphoric. But since it's canonized, so now the din is, therefore, it's a din of Torah be'etzim, now it has to be explained again today. Now, I don't even, at that point in time, I have to say, I'm not looking at what David meant, but since this is Ruach HaKodesh B'fiv, what did God want us to understand from the words that David wrote at that time? And that's why today we need Pshatim HaMischatshim B'chol Yoim Kimavur B'Rashbam. Now we need Pshatim HaMischatshim B'chol Yoim to try to understand that either in metaphor or in Pshat Remez Rishon. Once it's Cyrus, Pshat Remez Rishon Sod, and in Pshat, I explain it with the science I know today. So there's a big aside here. If I want to know what he thought what he thought. What does the text talk to you? That's another question. Okay, a big nafkamina. When it's in the Rishonim, I have to know what he thought. When it's Amiroyim Tanah, I have to know what he thought. But when it's Torah Ksav, I have to know what the Ksav is saying to me today. And that's a major difference, okay? So there's a major nafkamina that may answer a certain question. I want to go further, and I'll take it further. Weiter. They give multiple reasons. Some of them are very, very interesting. Okay. Okay, they quote the Gemara in Yuma, Mipnei Mayim Koil She'odam Nishma Bayoim Kederach Shenishma Balayla. The Gemara said, Mipnei Galgul Chama Shemenaseh Berakia Kechoresh Hamanaseh Barazim. And since there's so much noise happening because of the Galgul Chama, that's why you don't hear all the noise of the world here. You understand what happened here? So you're living in a noisy world. What's the noisy world? The noise of the Galgul Chama. Therefore, you become like deaf to basic noises down here. This is a Gemara. So Gemara took for granted the noise of the Galgal Chama, which obviously is heard in this world, and because that you live in a certain noisy environment, and you get used to a noisy environment, you stop hearing less noise. I suffer from that problem myself. I mean, I actually went to a clinic a few 2-3 years ago. I had that problem. I had for whatever reason because of heavy high decibel noises which I experienced in my left ear. I had a chavrusa for 12 years, which was a high pitched guy. Okay, and maybe Israeli weddings, I don't know. So basically, it messed up my ears to the extent that it's from certain decibels and further, I can't hear it. And if you go in a wedding, I just forget it. I'm deaf. The noise is such, I don't hear anything else. That's it. I walk out. Everyone talk to me outside. Okay, that's the way it is. The high-pitched noises put me into a certain deficit. That's what he says over here. Because you're living in a noisy environment of Galgal Chama. That's why you don't hear smaller noises. This is a Gemara in Yom Chav. So that's the same thing. Now, how are you going to explain that science of that Chazal? How is Rabbi X going to explain that? We say, Kach Mekubal Misinai, that's the way it is. Give me a break. V'kach Mischayev Bakol. And this way it always has to be in all things, not just in the Shemesh, or in all the Kechavim. Aval Aristo Doche et Zeh. Umavar she'en lem kol. Amachloikis, Pythagoras and Aristo. Okay, so this is like, the machlek, the Pythagoras, and obviously Chazal accepted Pythagoras. At least that's some of the Gemara in Yuma. Aristotle argued. Okay, you see the beauty of this, that he first wants to know what the truth is, and then we'll deal with it later. He has no problem of saying that Chazal accepted a certain contemporary perception of reality, which may or not be true. We know it's not true. Relax, okay? We've been there already. We hear the noise, we can now hear it. Okay, and let's say it's so noisy you can't even hear it there. I can see someone saying that. You know what I mean? I can even know who would say that. You know what I mean? No, it's still true. It's just you don't hear it. Okay. Anyway, now what are we going to do? I'm a nice firm Jew. So we have Chazal, which accept the school of Pythagoras, and then we have Aristotle argues. Now, how could he argue on Chazal? Chazal are absolutely right, and for him, Aristotle is the paragon of truth. We can say that Aristotle was Takeh Chacham Shebechachamim. He believes he's one dag of Chacham below Nevuah. How could he possibly be cholik on Chazal and sciences? Wow! So he says very simple. Al yeh ze muzar beinecha shehashkafas Aristo cholek hashkafas Chachamim bazeh. And goodness sake, this is not astronomy alone. This is because there's no astronomical proof for A or B. We're not talking about the questions what moves around what. Okay, we're talking is there noise or not noise. The science here was based on what? On certain theses on Metzias, which really had it wasn't science. It was the science of the time. That's what science was. There was a hashposh between, it's like literature. History at one time was totally different. You think history is what history is today. History, read Flavius. He writes what people thought and felt. The famous, you ever go to Masada? Obviously. You obviously know this famous speech of Ben Yair. Did anybody ever read it? Raise your hand, whoever wrote the speech or read the speech of Ben Yair. Raise it. I want to see who's there. Just you two. That's it. So you should read it. Well, then you don't know what you're doing in Masada. You really should read the famous, whatever happened there. There's a beautiful speech by Ben Yair, the head of the Kanaim that were there. Actually, if you read his speech, you understand he was really not a Prushi. He ran, but he was one of the sects. He was not mainstream rabbinic Orthodox at the time. If you read the value system, that's very frightening. Okay, as a religious Jew, I think it's abhorrent what happened there. But let go. But today it's heroism, etc. L'maisa, if you read it carefully and think in Chazal, it's geferlich what happened there. There's a heter to be ma'abed atzmon l'das because of Yisurim, etc. But they didn't do that. They killed each other. No heter for that. That's pashish v'chizdamim. So to make a heroism out of that is to basically make a heroism of a Merida B'Hashem. Trust the Balavera. I hate to say it, Nebuch, poor guy. Why do you want to kill somebody first? Let him kill himself. then we can talk business. But even then, it doesn't say there, do it because of Yisurim, because of this. No, how could we dream to live as slaves? No such heter. So even if it was Mabras Ladas, it's also Asur. So I hate to say it. That thing is a terrible speech, if you ever read it. You didn't read it, because no people don't read it. But don't worry, it was never said. Why? Because what's the history? How does he know this happened? Everyone died there. So he says, because this old toothless grandmother with 2 grandchildren which are in a cave, and they can show you where the cave is. Okay? Have you ever walked up the Serpentine path, Shvil Nachash, or you just go with the funny cart, or go the other way where it's easy, by where they have the Sound Light show? If you went the Serpentine Road, so you go up there. Look, this I did. Your age, younger. Okay, so you go up there. You can see the cave. Okay, now from the cave, Ben Yair was on the top. Man, she had an unbelievable hearing, and he must have had a loudspeaker. Okay, and then he had this unbelievable, beautiful speech with the language is perfect. How this illiterate, toothless grandmother, which probably hardly hears anything, from that cave in there, hear this beautiful speech and write it down. And she remembered verbatim, and she ultimately, when he wrote his book 3 years later on the shores of the river Tiber in Rome, he brought her over and he sat down and he heard this over a cup of coffee. No, and that's called history. So people put it says in Flavius. Also says in Flavius. Zechreinu levracha, that's all I have to say. You understand? The Torah says if you're used to reading ancient history, history today is much more scientific. History demands verification. Ancient history, it's a historical novel, which we pick out pieces which we figure we can try to verify them. But multitudes of it is historical novels. Titus really was good. It was the Jews that started. You read the book. It's not history. He also actually writes that he's a prophet. How does he explain how he understands people's feelings? Because Flavius writes, I'm a prophet. Okay, very nice. You read a book that says, I'm a prophet, and therefore you understand. What would you say about a guy like this? You'd put him into funny farm, okay? I love breaking idols, okay? After my great-grandfather Avram Avinu did it when he was young. So this is one of the avodah zaros that have to be broken. Relax on the history. Relax on the science. That's what I'm trying to say. You can relax, okay? Okay, so let's understand carefully here. So therefore we know, again, how is it possible that they can argue with Chazal? So he says, Ki hashkafa zu, klomar im yeshtem kolot nispeches ledas galgal kavuo mazalot chozrim. This has to do with an understanding of a galgal. There's a machlekes in this which is not in the get. It's a gemara in Psachim, whether the mazalish whether it's a machlekes in between Chachmei Umas Olam and Chazal. Whether we hold that galgal is kavua, it doesn't move. But the mazalos move, the mazalos in the galgalim move, or the mazalos are the kavua, mazalos are the constellations, and the galgalim are moving. Okay? So he says, and we know, I don't think that part's that important to explain, so I let it go, because why would deal with obsolete science? Not interested in anymore. Whatever is his title, this question whether it's noisy or not, depending on a certain plukta, whether the bodies are moving or the galgalim are moving. And he says, they were machriya. The Gemara says that Chachmei Umar Olam were machriya Chazal. We have quite a few places where there's a machlekes between Chachmei Umas Ha'olam and Chazal, and they were maskim to Chachmei Umas Ha'olam. V'u Amaram befeirush, this is a Lashon HaGemara over there, okay? But what does it say there? It says, V'nitzchu Chachmei Umas Ha'olam. That's a Gemara in Pesachim. V'zeh nachon, zok the Rambam. Ki advarim ha'yuniyim, when we talk about things which can be deduced and understood, things which are seichel, okay? Not when something which comes b'mesaira, azayidus, okay? There's a certain kabbalah b'mesaira that this is a fact. But things which are deduced through logic or logical tools, whether science, philosophy, whatever it be, things that you can talk and feel with your 5 senses. Going back to things, there are things that there's no way you can deduce historically or scientifically or philosophically. You can't deduce by Har Sinai. There's no philosophical proof of Har Sinai, no scientific proof of Har Sinai. didn't have to be. The only reason you have it is because you have a historical reality which proves it to you, what we call historical proof. That's not called a davar iyuni, that's called a davar chushi. A davar chushi goes with Messiah equals. When I say Messiah, I mean it's a historical tradition. Now, we're not going there at the moment to explain why. I think I dealt with that last year. I dealt with it at length, the Messiah, Messina, etc. Let's do this. But davarim iyunim lo diber behem kol mi shediber. Anybody who spoke, and I'm going to say clearly, you can see the Lashon and Rambam, even a prophet, when he spoke about dvarim iyuniyim, equal scientific realities or things like that, he did not talk out of prophecy or out of tradition. He came from philosophical or scientific deduction. He's a Navi. The Navi is also a philosopher. The Navi is also a science, or he's intelligent. Therefore, we must accept not depending on who said it, but if we have final proof to prove something, that's what's there. So you cite Aleph Gadol, it says over here. It says here that even we have a machlekes in sciences. We have Chazal accepted Pythagoras, and Aristotle no, and the Rambam obviously is accepting Aristotle. So he says you have to understand it's a double pashut. Why not? Because the Chazal accepted didn't mean they got it from Sinai. It means they came to the same. Either they were astronomers or whatever dated scientists, or they trusted a certain school. One of the two. We're going to look at another Rambam and see it in Mefurish. So in reality, is we don't care who they are. They're very fine people which trusted certain professionals, or were trained by those professionals. We didn't get from Sinai and Messiah whether there is what the Galgalim make noise or not, or the Galgalim are Misnaneya and the Mazolos are Kfuim, or the Mazolos are Misnaneya and the Galgalim Kfuim. They couldn't get that for Sinai because there is no Galgalim. Das ist zwei days in the Gemara. The Galgalim don't exist. Maybe in your romantic emotion, they don't exist. So what's das Eichta Machlekes mi Sinai? When you say the Sinai gave a sheker, chashtus. That's what the Rambam is saying. So we have to understand when it comes. This is a very important piece of Rambam. I'm going to say it again. Hadvarim yuniyim lo diber behem kol mi shediber ele kfi sheviu elav ha'iyun. Lefikach tzarich lizbor mashin iskaymoi chachoy elav. And you don't look at the bearer of the tidings. You check the tidings himself. Is it proven? Is it right or wrong? Well, if it's right, very nice to know that also some great man felt the same way. If it's wrong, sorry, the great man made a mistake, and that's okay with us. And that's what the Gemara says, that the Chachma Yom Ha'olam, U'menatzeach Chachmas Hayad, Chachamim. This is a Dvarim Avur, and I'm going to show this Mefurish in Lashon HaRambam, just to have it clear. The Rambam is in Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, in Perek Yud Zayin, Halacha Yud Chav Dalet. No, you don't have it. So the Rambam writes, I just want you, he talks about the different cheshbainis of the, well, once if you ever learn Hilchos Kiddush HaChodesh, like once in your life you have to do this, right? According to Rambam, that's part of the mitzvah of a Chodesh to be able to mechashiv cheroshim. I not tell it to you, okay, it's a mitzvah say, you put on tzitzis, you're worried about tchelis, so this is one, whether that's tchelis or not, I don't know, but this is a mitzvah say, I know. There's no one argues. So I guess you have to know it, be machashiv b'iludus. I'm just trying to say what people, priorities in the world are like the, I don't know where they come from. I know where they come from. They're not from the books. So I'm going to read a Rambam to you. V'tam kol ela cheshbaines u'mipnei mosifim miyan zeh mipnei megarin. Sometimes we add, sometimes we're daiche, there's trias, right? You forget it. How to make a luach depends on a lot of factors. ואיך נודע כל דבר ודבר מאלה הדברים, והראיה כל דבר ודבר, היא חוכמת התקופות והגימטריות שחיברו בהם חכמי יוון ספרים הרבה. Yeah, of course, at his time, the great astronomers were Greece. He just mentioned Pythagoras, he mentioned all that. והם הנמצאים עכשיו ביד החכמים. That's what sages have today. And the astronomy that we have is Greek astronomy. אבל הספרים שחיברו חכמי ישראל, שהיו בימי הנביאים מבני יששכר, we know that Bnei Yisachar Yodei Itim Labina, those books which they had printed at the time, and they were living at the times of the prophets, we didn't say they were prophets, we said they were astronomers, were living at that period of time, Lo Higiu Eleinu, we don't have them. Okay. We also don't have Bashal Gaba Gecholim. We don't have a lot of different books. Okay, we don't have them. Umiachar shekol ela advarim berayot brurotem. I love when he uses this word. Okay, It's not kedikiraya. She'ein be'em doifi. There's no way of moving this cheese, so to speak. This stays the way it is. V'i efshar la'adam laharer achrehem. He's convinced. Ein choshishim la'mechaber. We don't care who wrote it. Ben shechibru otam nevi'im. Ben shechibru otam goyim. It totally doesn't matter. שכל דבר שנתגלה טעמו ונודעה אמיתתו בראיות שאין בהם דופי, because anything which we understand the reasoning and we have come to that conclusion with irrefutable proof, raya she'ein bo dofi means irrefutable proof. It's not conjecture, it's not mistaver, all the great words that people, efsher, mele, no. 1 and 1 is 2, okay? Which is very, as the Lashon of the Ramban and the Akdam of the Melchama says, this is something we don't find in Gemara. He writes before, in Gemara, this is not like Cheshbon. There's no mofes chotech. There's no cutting-edge proof. It's all based on a subjective perception. And therefore, there, all the rayas are rayas she'ish b'hem toifi. Pretty rough thing to say. I'm using Lashon of Rambam. But when we talk about mathematical proof, so at the time he thought that this astronomy was irrefutable, which is interesting. Today, I hate to say it, gamarnu, halach. But at the time, this was irrefutable proof, whatever. Obviously, based again on philosophical understanding, he took for granted that philosophy, since it's a given, is also irrefutable. So for him, certain philosophical underpinnings of these sciences are also in his eyes irrefutable. Okay, I'm not the philosopher, so I can't judge it. I can only say we know that things have changed, right? We don't care about the person that taught it or said it. We accept things not because of who said it, but what's being said, if it's true or not true. This is the aside that the Rambam found also here. The Rambam therefore explains we have no problem of going against the science of Chazal, because there's no such thing as science of Chazal. It's the science that the Chazal understood and proved. And therefore, Mamela, if today we can refute that, so we don't care if it's a Navi, he says, doesn't care. His Lashon was, Shekol Davar, what is it? אי אפשר בין שחיברו אותם נביאים, בין שחיברו אותם גויים. It doesn't matter whether you're a holy man or a goy. If it's true, it's true. If it's not true, it's not true. Okay? It's Rambam. Now, I want to show you another Rambam for this. The other Rambam, you have the second Rambam, which is Nechelik Gimel, Perek Yudaled. Oh, God, there's no way I can do all this. Okay? Should I start? First I'll get to the end, and then I'll go backwards. I want to get to the end. Look at the end where he writes, I'm looking at the clock, and I know I want to get to my run time. Here it is. Go to the second column, left column, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9th line, Oivi Hagram. Go to the last 2 words, Velo Tevakesh. Do you see it? No, from the 9th going up, from the bottom going up. From the bottom going up, 9, you see it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes. 9th line from the bottom going up. The line starts Ovi Agram. Go to the last 2 words, Velo Tevakesh. Do you see it? So he writes, I'm going to use this translation again. Al tivaksheni l'ta'em kol ma shamru b'yanei atchuna im hamatzav kfi shehu. Don't ask me to try to reconcile everything that Chazal said about astronomy with reality the way it is, equals the way, the word it is very, means the way we perceive at the date, the way we perceive at the time. Kolshkin with 150 kavachimers, the science that we perceive today, okay? Okay? Al tevaksheni l'ta'em. שכל מה שאמרו בענייני התכונה עם המצב כפי שהוא, לפי שהמדעים באותו הזמן היו חסרים. He obviously thinks that the Madai at his time is already mushlam. Okay, once again, because he is very enamored with Aristotle. Okay, but he definitely felt that the world of Greece, sciences was really deficient. Greece gave order, system, really gave tremendous weight to logic, to causative thinking. It also gave immense weight to philosophical deduction, which is the underpinnings of a lot of all the axioms that we have here. And that's something, it became a system. You can argue it and you can prove it. Beforehand, azayidus, okay, that's the way it is. So he said, the sciences. For him, science means the natural sciences around everything, not just astronomy. Sciences at that time, not just astronomy. For goodness sake, does anybody think that other sciences, I say it because I have a certain person who wrote a book and decided to limit this to astronomy. First of all, I know what kind of translation he had of the Rambam. My translation says Hamada'im, which means the sciences. Second of all, there's any logical reason to say that astronomy was deficient at the time, but otherwise botanics were like updated to the Matzchik Lomar. I mean, anybody that knows the history of man and of thought, this is like a swear for, I don't know, for one of those. Lefi Hamada'im, ba'oto hazman hayu chasirim. V'lo dibru b'kach, and Chazal did not talk about these scientific phenomena, mishum sheyesh l'mesayris ba'isa advar min ha'neviim. When Chazal talk sciences or things based on understanding of science, it's not because they have a mesayris, I can use that word now, mesayris from the prophets. Mesayris makes it, a mesayra, okay? Like in Wires, the mesayra notes. That, what that's for, okay? If you don't know, you'll find out, okay? It's how you pass your tests. Okay, so basically, it's like Cliff Notes. Okay, so Messiris, no, they didn't have a Messiris from the Nevi'im. Scientific information of Chazal is not based on a Messiris from Sinai or from the Nevi'im. Ella mitzad she'em yadanei otam adorot ba'otam ha'miktzot. It's because they were cutting-edge, knowledgeable scientists of that issue at the time. Shmuel obviously was a super-duper astronomer. The Gemara describes that he is Baki and Shvila de Rekia, Shvila de Nardo. So he himself was a cutting-edge science. He was an astronomer, rabbi, doctor. Okay, I told you already. You got to get used to this. This is what the Noam and Amoraim were. They didn't the world. Okay, the guy knew it. Now, what did he knew it from Sinai? He knew it from he spent time. And he became, according to Lashon Rambam, this is what he's referred to, Yadanei otam adorot botam miktzot. They were either cutting-edge science. So what could they have known? What science could know at that time? It doesn't say that, by the way, God sent them messages, sparks into their brain. Okay, Rambam doesn't write that. Okay? And alternatively, but not everybody was a scientist. Some of them were just good old learners, which is super important, the most important thing. Sham'um miyadanei otam adorot. So either they were super scientists and they're reflecting the science, their own knowledge of science at the time, or if they weren't scientists, they were reflecting the cutting edge of science at the time. When there's a machlekes in Gemara, if in Gemara and Ksubas, are you allowed to have beer rishayna on Friday night? What's the shaila? You're breaking the basulim. It goes into different shailas of breaking a blood vessel, of making a pesach. These are shailas in halacha. So first Gemara says the big shaila. Who says you're breaking a blood vessel? Da mifkid pocket or chabur v'mechaber. Mifkid pocket means that Rashi's understanding of Chazal. I don't know. I can only do with Rashi and Rishonim. The blood of the virginity is not in a blood vessel that you're breaking. It is like a door there which is tightly locked, and you have to push the door open, and the blood comes out. It's like a pocket of blood, and you push something out. You open the door open, and it falls out. You're not doing a chabur. We pass that la'alocha. Now, do some anatomy, and you tell me if that exists. We pass that la'alocha. Irksome. Okay? I'm not going into the weird stuff about lice and this. This is the best one I know. Other one, we can spiel. This is it. Okay? Zaymer, Michael. But obviously, so do you think there was a Mosheres Sinai with the Damif Pocket Mechuber with the Shai? What did we hear from Sinai? It's a Bisa Bekutcha. There were obviously schools of thought at the time, and Examoraim accepted the arguments of school number X, and Examoraim accepted the arguments of Y. It's a machlekes in science, just like the machlekes of the galgal makes noise or doesn't. Is it music or is it just deafening noise? Okay, a machlekes. Okay, you know what I mean? Is it Sting or is it Vivaldi? Nafkamina. Or is it Santana or Vivaldi? That's even worse. Okay, I don't know if you would know that music. Okay, electric, oh, music. I got news for you. There's no music there. I stated Shira and everything. Yeah, figure it out later. Okay, first of all, you take the truth from where it is. First, they done Chazal that the Chazal were not scientists always. They took for science, but this one thing's clear: their science does not come from Masorah of Chazal, from Masorah Messina or Nevi'im. Again, the lashon is. ולא בעברו בכך מפני שיש להם מסורס באוסם הדברים מן הנביאים, אלא מצד שהם ידעני אותם הדורות באותם המקצועות, או שמעו מידעני אותם הדורות. And therefore, ולא בגלל זה נאמר על דברים שמצאנו להם שהם מתאימים עם האמת, שהם בלתי נכונים, או תאמו במקרה. It's not because that we're going to say what happens when we find things which actually do fit with science. That they're wrong or they by haphazardly worked. No, כל מה שאפשר לבאר דברי אדם כדי שיהיה תואם מהמציאות, שהוכחה מציאותם, הוא יותר עדיף ונכון לבעל הטבעים הנעלים ואיש הצדק. It's very clear that if you can interpret a language of Chazal, which will fit with science that at least was the cutting edge of science, the truth of science, well, bravo. Why not? But once again, but doesn't mean that everything he says is wrong. It's a very interesting idea that he's saying. We don't have to say that everything that Chazal said, they made a mistake because it's not the science we know. If you can see the science we know in the lashon of Chazal, it's okay. Why not say it? Now, this is a very interesting Rambam, because what happens if science, which we historically know, could not have been known at that point of time? Well, in other words, a science which we know, they didn't have the tools to make that call. So there's no way you can stick that into Chazal. But if it's just a question of as I would say, of a logical deduction, and there's a science which is not based on new tools, but the tools which were available at the time, and you can create another logical deduction which will make it more amiable with what we know as a truth, yeah, you should. Why not? He was a very honorable person. We should try to explain Chazal in a way that makes sense. There's a big covet of Chazal here. He's saying as much as you can to see these people reflecting a truth, you should. It's the right thing to do if you're an Ishat say you're a man with intellectual honesty, you'll try to do that. You respect the person, you understand who that is. He's not a light-weighted person. But get straight. If you can't, then get used to it. They reflect the science of the period. So when they tell you that there are people like mermaids, or people that grow out of the earth, which I don't know, half vegetable and half man, the Gemara's and Chulin are really very interesting. Relax. Or, for example, when Chazal say mefurish, maybe we can explain it, but that the Chazal, the Gemara Moshe says that a wolf, when it makes a drasa, when it goes in, it sticks its nails into the sheep. It makes a treif, okay? When does it kill it? So he says that it's not the puncturing if there's poison in their nails, and that only is extracted when they remove the nails from the body. Now, obviously, there's no poison in the nails of wolves. No, could be they meant poison, and they were very dated. Or it could mean, maybe it means bacteria. But then I don't know enough of science now to decide, is there a possibility that this bacteria only really affects when the nails are moved again out? I don't know, but then we have to look at things like that and try to explain them if we can. And if we can't, we have no problem of saying that this sugya is based on a perception of reality, which is obsolete. Your question now stands a serious question. If Lamaisa we were machriya halacha on a science which is obsolete, and there's no way of explaining them, what do we do today? The Chumrah and the Kula. This is an interesting topic, but that's not for now because it's 7:05, and I guess it's goodbye until next week.